I don't think there was a single moment in my childhood when I wasn't painfully aware that I was the family disappointment. Not in a dramatic way, no formal announcement where they declared it. Just a slow, consistent message. 1,000 tiny comments, dismissive glances, and skeptical responses that all conveyed the same truth. My older brother, Ethan, was the one destined for greatness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. More respect, more faith, more investment. And I was the one they had already written off. If I shared a business idea at dinner, my father, Richard, would barely look up from his plate. "That's nice, Alexis," he'd say, voice flat with disinterest. But when Ethan mentioned even the vaguest plan, Dad would lean forward, eyes bright, asking detailed questions and offering connections. Even when I brought home straight A's or won academic competitions, Mom would offer a distracted smile. "That's good, honey." Then she'd turn to my brother and gush about his B+ in economics. "He has such a natural head for business," she'd tell visitors, while I sat quietly with my perfect report card, invisible. It didn't happen overnight. That's what I need people to understand. It wasn't one crushing comment. It was the gradual construction of a narrative where my dreams were always treated as childish fantasies while my brother's most casual interests were seen as brilliant potential. The pattern was subtle at first but became clearer as we grew. What began as "Ethan is just naturally gifted" turned into the unspoken family rule that he would inherit the family business someday. Meanwhile, I was gently steered toward more suitable careers. Teaching, perhaps. Something stable and unambitious. My parents' technology consulting firm, Renwick Solutions, had been growing steadily for 15 years. Dad had built it from nothing after leaving a corporate job, and it was his pride and joy. "This will all be Ethan's someday," he'd say during company celebrations, arm around my brother's shoulders. I would stand off to the side, holding a glass of sparkling cider, wondering why it had never occurred to him that I might want to be part of it too. I studied harder, joined business clubs at school, created small ventures selling custom jewelry to classmates. Each small success was met with the same lukewarm response. "That's cute, Alexis. A nice hobby." The word hobby stung most of all. It diminished everything I built, everything I achieved. My brother's ideas were investments. Mine were hobbies. I carried notebooks filled with business concepts, market analyses, and improvement ideas for Renwick Solutions. Once, when I was 16, I gathered my courage and showed Dad a detailed proposal for expanding their services to include social media management for their clients. He glanced at the carefully prepared document, flipping through my research and projections with barely a pause on each page. "This isn't really how business works, Alexis," he said, handing it back. "It's more complicated than you understand." He didn't elaborate. Didn't offer guidance. Didn't suggest improvements. Just dismissed it entirely and changed the subject to Ethan's baseball game. So I stopped showing them my ideas. I kept working, kept planning, kept learning, but I did it quietly. I built a small following online reviewing tech products. I saved every dollar I earned from babysitting and weekend jobs. I applied for business programs at colleges across the country, far from the shadow of Renwick Solutions and the family that couldn't see my potential. Mom found the acceptance letter from Wharton before I could tell them. She was emptying my trash can when she noticed the envelope. "Business school?" she asked, confusion evident in her voice. "Alexis, is this really the best use of your talents? You've always been so creative. Wouldn't you be happier in something more artistic?" I stood in my bedroom doorway, watching her hold my future in her hands with such obvious disappointment. "I want to build something, Mom. I've always wanted to build something." She sighed that particular sigh I'd grown to hate. The one that said I was being difficult. "I just don't want you to set yourself up for failure, sweetie. Business is so competitive. So cutthroat. You're too sensitive for that world. Too sensitive. Too creative. Too unrealistic. Never tough enough, shrewd enough, or practical enough." In their eyes, the message was consistent: business wasn't for me. Success wasn't for me. The family legacy wasn't for me. I went to Wharton anyway. I took out loans. I applied for every scholarship available. I worked part-time jobs throughout college while maintaining a perfect GPA. I interned at startups during summers instead of coming home. I built connections, learned from mentors who actually believed in me, and gradually developed the confidence my family had systematically undermined. Meanwhile, Ethan went to Dad's alma mater, a respectable state school with a decent business program. He joined the family business immediately after graduating, stepping into a management position created specifically for him. No interviews. No competition. Just birthright. I graduated with honors and multiple job offers. I chose a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle, about as far from my East Coast family as I could reasonably get. I called to tell them the news. Seattle? Mom sounded worried. That's so far, Alexis. And tech is so unstable. Wouldn't you prefer something more secure? Dad chimed in, his voice carrying that familiar note of resigned disappointment. Just don't expect us to bail you out when the industry takes a downturn. You've made your choice. I didn't ask for their blessing. I'd stopped expecting it years ago. I won't need a bailout, I said simply, and ended the call. The next 5 years were a blur of 80-hour work weeks, rapid promotions, and strategic moves from company to company, building my experience and reputation. I lived frugally, saved aggressively, and continued developing my own business concepts on the side. I rarely went home, making excuses about work commitments during holidays. The truth was, I couldn't bear to sit at the family dinner table and watch my parents beam with pride at Ethan's modest achievements while treating my growing success as a lucky streak that couldn't possibly last. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When I did visit, the conversations were predictable. Still at that tech company? Dad would ask, though I'd told him 3 times I'd moved to a new position. Ethan just landed the Henderson account. 7 figures. That's real business, Alexis. Stability. I'd nod and pass the potatoes, swallowing both the food and the words. I wanted to say words about my recent promotion to director level. About the stock options that were already worth more than Ethan's annual salary. About the venture capitalists who had started to notice the side project I was developing. I stayed quiet because I'd learned long ago that my achievements would always be diminished, so why give them the ammunition? Then came Thanksgiving 5 years ago. I hadn't planned to go home, but Mom insisted. The whole family will be there, she said. Grandma's not getting any younger. And Ethan has big news. Of course he did. I flew across the country, rental car, hotel room, all arranged. And paid for myself. I arrived at their house with a bottle of wine and a forced smile, preparing for the usual subtle digs and dismissals. The house looked exactly the same. Family photos dominated the walls, mostly of Ethan. His graduation, his wedding, his first day at Renwick Solutions. There was one of me, tucked in the corner by the hallway bathroom. College graduation, my smile tight and eyes already looking toward the future, away from the camera, away from them. Dinner was a production. Mom's famous turkey, Dad's meticulous carving, Grandma's secret recipe stuffing. The table conversation revolved around Renwick Solutions' recent successes and Ethan's central role in them. I listened, nodded, smiled at appropriate moments. No one asked about my work. No one seemed to remember what I even did for a living. Until dessert. So, Alexis, Aunt Linda said during a rare lull, what are you up to these days? Still with that internet company? Before I could answer, Dad chuckled. Alexis is still finding herself, he said, as if I were a college freshman switching majors instead of a 30-year-old professional. Jumping from job to job in that tech world. No stability. I set down my fork carefully. Actually, I've been with Horizon Tech for 2 years now. I'm leading their product development team. That sounds important, Grandma said kindly. Mom patted her hand. It's one of those new digital things. Very trendy. Not like Renwick. Renwick has been solid for 20 years. Speaking of Renwick, Dad said, turning to my brother with obvious pride, Ethan, why don't you share your news? Ethan straightened up, chest puffing slightly with importance. We've just secured a government contract. 5 years, guaranteed income. This is the kind of stability that builds real businesses, real legacies. Everyone at the table applauded. My father raised his glass. To Ethan, the future of Renwick Solutions. Glasses clinked. Congratulations flowed. I took a small sip of wine and stayed silent. Then my father turned to me, his expression a mix of condescension and what he probably thought was helpful concern. You see, Alexis, this is what success looks like. Not chasing trends or playing with apps. Real business. Concrete results. Something shifted inside me. All the years of dismissal, of being underestimated, of having my ambitions treated as childish fantasies, they crystallized in that moment into a cold, clear resolve. I'm not playing with apps, Dad, I said quietly. He waved his hand dismissively. Whatever digital thing you're doing now. It's not building something lasting, something real. That's what we've taught Ethan. That's what he understands. Richard, Mom warned, sensing the shift in my demeanor. But Dad was on a roll now, warming to his favorite subject, my shortcomings. Look, Alexis, there's no shame in admitting business isn't for everyone. You've always been more of a dreamer. Impractical. We've tried to guide you toward more suitable paths, but you've always been stubborn. The table had gone quiet. Ethan looked uncomfortable but said nothing. He never did. You think I'm stubborn? I asked. Unrealistic, Dad corrected. You've never understood how real business works. The relationships, the long-term thinking, the practical considerations. You chase these tech fantasies that disappear overnight. I took a deep breath. I had two choices, swallow it as I always had, or finally speak my truth. For once, I chose the latter. I've built a company, I said simply. Dad blinked, then chuckled. A website isn't a company, Alexis. Nova Tech isn't a website. It's a cybersecurity platform. We have 78 employees. 3 offices. Clients in 22 countries. The table went silent. Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. That's nice, Dad said, clearly not believing me. A little startup. Very cute. That word again. Cute. Like I was still 16, showing him my notebook of business ideas. We secured $12 million in Series B funding last month, I continued, my voice steady. Our valuation is just under $90 million. I own 62%. Ethan coughed, wine going down the wrong way. Grandma looked confused. Dad's expression hardened. Now you're just making things up, he said. If you were running some multi-million-dollar company, we would have heard about it. Would you? When have you ever asked about my work? When have you ever shown any interest in what I've built? Because we know you, Alexis, Mom interjected, her voice gentle but firm. We know your tendencies toward exaggeration. Your impractical dreams. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and passed it to my father. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at the balance, then narrowed in suspicion. This could be anything, he said, handing the phone back. Some company account you have access to. Not yours. I laughed then, not from humor but from the sheer absurdity of it all. Even faced with evidence, they couldn't believe in me. Wouldn't believe in me. You'll never succeed in real business, Alexis, Dad said, his tone final, dismissive. You don't have what it takes. You never did. That's why. We focused on Ethan. He understands the value of steady growth, of tradition, of building on solid ground. Your internet schemes will collapse, and then what? You'll have nothing to show for all this running around. I stood up, napkin placed carefully beside my half-eaten pumpkin pie. Thank you for dinner. I should get back to my hotel. Oh, Alexis, don't be dramatic, Mom sighed. Your father is just trying to protect you from disappointment. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical with my time. I have an early flight tomorrow. Nova needs me. Nova, Dad scoffed. Such a pretentious name for a little side project. I looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him. The man I had spent my childhood trying to impress. The man whose approval I had craved for so long. And I finally saw him clearly, not as the business titan I had imagined, but as someone small, someone afraid of change, someone who could only see success if it looked exactly like his own path. Goodbye, Dad, I said quietly. Mom. Ethan. Happy Thanksgiving. I walked out to my rental car, hands steady, breathing even. For the first time in my life, I felt no urge to cry after a family gathering. No tightness in my chest. No desperate need to prove myself. Just clarity. And freedom. As I drove away from the house, my phone rang. It was my COO, Maya. Sorry to bother you during the holiday, but the Westfield proposal came back. They want to move forward. Full integration, all services, global implementation. I smiled as I merged onto the highway, leaving my childhood home in the rearview mirror. That's great news. Let's schedule a strategy session for Monday. Will do. How was the family dinner? I considered the question. Clarifying, I said. Finally. Very clarifying. What I didn't tell Maya was that Westfield was just the beginning. I had bigger plans. Much bigger. Plans that had been forming since that first dismissive, "That's not how business works, Alexis," when I was 16. Plans that had crystallized during tonight's dinner, when my father had, once again, told me I would never succeed. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their understanding. I had something far more powerful now. I had proof. And soon, very soon, they would have no choice but to see it. The next 2 years were transformative for Nova Tech. We expanded rapidly, acquiring smaller security firms and integrating their technologies into our platform. Our client list grew to include Fortune 500 companies, international banks, and government agencies. The company valuation soared past $300 million. My personal net worth, on paper at least, had reached a point that would have seemed impossible. To the girl who once sold homemade jewelry to classmates. I rarely thought about my family during this time. I was too busy building, growing, leading. The occasional text from mom on birthdays or holidays received brief, polite responses. I didn't ask about Renwick Solutions. They didn't ask about Nova. We maintained the fiction of family through minimal contact and careful avoidance of anything meaningful. Until the industry rumors started. Maya brought it to my attention during our weekly strategy meeting. Have you seen the reports about Renwick Solutions? She asked, sliding a tablet across the conference table. I hadn't. I deliberately avoided news about my family's company. It was healthier that way. The article outlined Renwick's growing challenges. Their government contract, the one Ethan had proudly announced at that Thanksgiving dinner, had been cut short due to budget reallocations. Several key clients had moved to competitors offering more innovative solutions. Their stock, which had gone public 3 years earlier in a modest IPO, had dropped 20% in 6 months. They're struggling to adapt to the changing market, Maya said. Their approach is outdated. They're losing ground to more agile competitors. I pushed the tablet back toward her. Not our concern. Maya studied me carefully. We'd worked together long enough for her to know my history, to understand the weight behind my dismissal of the topic. Actually, she said slowly, it might be. They have an impressive client list. Established relationships with key players in sectors we're targeting. Their technological infrastructure is outdated, but their market position is still valuable. I knew where she was heading. You're suggesting we look at them as an acquisition target. She nodded. From a purely business perspective, it makes sense. Their current valuation makes it affordable. Their client base complements ours. Their market reputation would accelerate our expansion plans. Find another target, I said flatly. Maya didn't argue. She respected my boundaries. The meeting moved on to other topics, other opportunities. But the seed had been planted, and in the quiet moments between decisions and meetings and conference calls, my mind kept returning to Renwick Solutions. To my father's certainty that I would never succeed. To my brother's position handed to him without effort or merit. To the business I had been told, repeatedly, I could never understand. 3 weeks later, I called Maya into my office. I want a complete analysis of Renwick Solutions, I said. Financials, client contracts, management structure, technological assets. Everything. She nodded, no surprise in her expression. She'd been waiting for this. This is purely business, I added, more for myself than for her. Of course, she said, but we both knew better. The analysis was thorough and confirmed what the industry rumors had suggested. Renwick was faltering. Their approach, once innovative, had become rigid. They had failed to adapt to changing client needs. Their technology platform was outdated. Their management, led by my father and brother, had made a series of increasingly desperate decisions trying to maintain their position without evolving their core offerings. Their stock had continued to fall. They were vulnerable. I spent a weekend alone in my apartment, reviewing the analysis, considering all angles. Was I contemplating this acquisition because it made business sense, or because of personal history? Was I seeking revenge or opportunity? Could I separate the two? By Monday morning, I had my answer. I called an emergency board meeting and presented the proposal. Nova Tech would make an offer for Renwick Solutions. The business case was sound. The financials made sense. The strategic advantages were clear. The board approved unanimously. The next steps happened quickly. Our legal team prepared the offer. Our financial team arranged the necessary capital. Our communications team developed the announcement strategy. Within 2 weeks, everything was in place. I could have delegated the next part. Should have, perhaps. But some moments you need to experience personally. I called my father's office directly, bypassing his assistant. He answered on the third ring. Richard Renwick. Dad, it's Alexis. A pause. Alexis. This is unexpected. Is everything okay? No concern in his voice. Just surprise and perhaps a touch of impatience. Everything's fine. I'm calling about business. Another pause. Business? What kind of business? I'd like to schedule a meeting with you and the Renwick Solutions executive team. He chuckled, that familiar dismissive sound. We're not looking for security software, Alexis. We handle that in-house. I'm not calling as a vendor. I'm calling as the CEO of Nova Technologies. His voice cooled. We're in the middle of some challenging transitions. This isn't a good time for whatever pitch you're planning. It's not a pitch, Dad. It's an acquisition offer. Nova Technologies wants to buy Renwick Solutions. Silence. Complete silence. I could almost see him, sitting at his desk, the heavy wooden one he'd had for 20 years, trying to process what I'd just said. That's not funny, Alexis, he finally said. It's not meant to be. Our offer is $42 per share. That's a 30% premium over your current market price. The formal offer will be delivered to your board tomorrow morning. This is absurd, he said, voice rising. You can't possibly have the resources for something like this. Our market cap is over 600 million, Dad. Renwick's is just under 90. We have the resources. No. His voice was firm now, angry. Absolutely not. This is some kind of game to you, some kind of revenge fantasy. Renwick Solutions is not for sale. Certainly not to you. That's not your decision alone. You have a board. You have shareholders. They'll want to hear our offer. I control the majority of voting shares. 52%, I agreed. I've done my research. But your fiduciary duty requires you to consider legitimate offers. And this is very legitimate. You will never own this company, he said, each word precise and hard. Never. Do you understand me? This is my legacy. This is what I built. This belongs to this family. I am family, I said quietly. He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Family? You walked away years ago. You wanted nothing to do with us. With the business. You chose your path. Ethan stayed. Ethan committed. Ethan will carry on what I built. Ethan has helped run Renwick into the ground, I said, keeping my voice level. Your stock has lost 40% of its value in 18 months. You've lost key clients. Your technology platform is outdated. Your market position is eroding daily. You know nothing about our business. I know everything about your business. Every contract, every client, every weakness. That's my job now, Dad. I know businesses. I understand them. I fix them. Or I acquire them. Silence again, longer this time. The meeting is scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m., I continued. Your office or ours, your choice. Our team will be prepared to answer all questions and address any concerns. This is happening, Dad. The only question is whether you want to be part of the conversation or not. This is a mistake, Alexis, he said finally. A terrible mistake. No, Dad. The mistake was telling me I would never succeed. The mistake was never seeing what I was capable of. I'll see you Thursday. I ended the call before he could respond. My hand wasn't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt strangely calm, as if everything in my life had been leading to this moment. Maya appeared in my doorway. How did he take it? Exactly as expected, I said. Make sure the presentation for Thursday is perfect. Every detail. Every number. Every projection. She nodded. Already on it. Thursday arrived clear and cold. I chose a simple charcoal suit, pearl earrings, minimal makeup. Professional. Confident. Nothing flashy. Nothing that could be dismissed as trying too hard. Our team arrived at Renwick Solutions headquarters 15 minutes early. The receptionist, new since my last visit years ago, greeted us with professional courtesy, unaware of the connection between the CEO of Nova Technologies and the company she worked for. We were led to the main conference room, the one where important clients were entertained, where major announcements were made. The room where I had never been invited as a child or teenager, even when I begged to attend client meetings just to observe and learn. The executive team was already seated. Dad at the head of the table, of course. Ethan to his right. 3. Other executives I didn't recognize filled out the rest of their side. My father's expression was granite, eyes cold, jaw set. Ethan looked nervous, fidgeting with his pen, eyes darting between me and Dad. I took my seat directly opposite my father, Maya and our team arranging themselves beside me. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched, heavy with history and tension. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," I began, my voice steady and professional. "We appreciate your time and your willingness to consider our proposal." "Let's be clear," my father said immediately. "We're here because corporate governance requires it. This proposal is not welcome, and it will not be accepted." I smiled slightly. "I understand your position, Mr. Renwick. However, I believe once you've heard our complete offer and implementation plan, you might reconsider." "I doubt that very much, Ms. Renwick," he replied, emphasizing my title with faint mockery. "It's Ms. Chen now," I corrected him. "I took my husband's name when we married last year." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He hadn't known I was married. Of course not. We hadn't spoken in years. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. "Now, shall we proceed with this formality so we can all get back to our actual work?" I nodded to Maya, who distributed presentation folders to everyone at the table. For the next 45 minutes, we walked through our proposal in meticulous detail. The financial offer, the integration plan, the technology upgrades we would implement, the client retention strategy, the market positioning, the projected growth. Throughout the presentation, I kept my focus professional, referring to Renwick Solutions as your company rather than my family's company. I presented data, projections, and strategies without emotion or personal references. This was business, nothing more. My father interrupted frequently at first, questioning our numbers, challenging our assumptions. But as the presentation progressed, as the thoroughness of our research and the soundness of our planning became evident, his interruptions grew less frequent. By the end, he was silent, his expression unreadable. Ethan, by contrast, looked increasingly uncomfortable. He hadn't said a word the entire meeting, just watched with growing anxiety as we systematically laid out how we would transform the struggling company he had helped mismanage. When the presentation concluded, I closed my folder and looked directly at my father. "We believe this offer represents not just fair value for shareholders, but the best path forward for Renwick Solutions, its clients, and its employees. We're prepared to answer any questions you might have." My father leaned back in his chair. "You've clearly put significant effort into this proposal," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I'll acknowledge that much. Thank you. However," he continued, "you've overlooked something fundamental. Renwick Solutions is not merely a balance sheet. It is my life's work. It is this family's legacy. Some things are not for sale, regardless of price." I had anticipated this response. "I understand sentiment and legacy are important considerations," I replied. "That's why our proposal includes provisions for maintaining the Renwick name as a division within Nova. It's why we've allocated resources for celebrating and honoring the company's history. And it's why we've created a senior advisory position that would allow you to remain connected to the business you built." "An advisory position," he repeated, a hint of disdain in his voice. "In my own company. In a division of Nova Technologies," I corrected gently. "A division that would benefit enormously from your experience and institutional knowledge." Ethan finally spoke, his voice tight with tension. "What about current management? What happens to them? To me?" I turned to my brother. "Our integration plan includes a comprehensive evaluation of all management positions. Those whose skills and performance align with our corporate objectives will be offered appropriate roles within the new structure." The clinical language wasn't lost on him. His face flushed. "So I'd have to interview for a position in what was my company?" "Everyone would be evaluated based on merit and performance metrics," I confirmed. "No exceptions." My father's hand came down hard on the table. "This is preposterous. You come in here with your Silicon Valley terminology and your slideshow, thinking you can just erase 20 years of history, of family commitment." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not erasing history, Dad. I'm acknowledging it. Including the parts where you consistently told me I would never succeed in business. That I didn't understand how the real world worked. That I was just chasing trends while Ethan was building something lasting." The room went very quiet. My team kept their expressions neutral, professional, though they knew the backstory. The other Renwick executives looked confused, uncomfortable. With the personal turn. "This isn't about family dynamics," my father said dismissively. "This is about business." "Exactly," I agreed. "This is absolutely about business. Nova Technologies has identified Renwick Solutions as an acquisition target that makes strategic and financial sense. The fact that there's personal history involved is irrelevant to the business case. If it's irrelevant, why are you bringing it up? He challenged. Because you are, I replied calmly. You're letting your personal feelings about me cloud your judgment about what's best for your company, your clients, and your shareholders. One of the other executives, a woman with silver-streaked hair and a carefully neutral expression, leaned forward slightly. Perhaps we should focus on the financial aspects of the offer. The premium over current market value is significant. My father shot her a look of barely contained anger. Karen, this isn't the time. With respect, Richard, she replied steadily, as CFO, it's precisely the time. We have fiduciary responsibilities to consider. I could see the dynamic shifting. In the room. The other executives were considering the offer seriously, weighing their obligations against my father's emotional resistance. It was exactly what I had anticipated, exactly what I had counted on. May I suggest, I said, that you take some time to review the complete proposal. Discuss it with your full board. Consider it from all angles. We're prepared to address any concerns or questions that arise during your deliberations. That seems reasonable, Karen, the CFO agreed before my father could object. We'll need at least 2 weeks, my father said, clearly stalling. Of course, I nodded. However, I should mention that our offer has an expiration date. 30 days from today. After that, we'll need to reassess based on updated market conditions. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. He recognized the pressure tactic, the subtle message that the offer might decrease if they delayed too long. We'll be in touch, he said curtly, standing to signal the meeting was over. As we gathered our materials, I approached him directly, extending my hand. Thank you for your time today. He looked at my outstretched hand for a moment, then shook it briefly, his grip cool and formal. This isn't what you think it is, Alexis. This isn't some triumphant moment of vindication. I never said it was, I replied quietly. It's a business transaction. Nothing more, nothing less. Is it? His voice dropped so only I could hear. Because it feels remarkably like the daughter I never thought would amount to anything in business is trying to buy the company I built to prove me wrong. I held his gaze. If that were true, it would say more about you than me. Wouldn't it? I didn't wait for his response. I rejoined my team, and we left the conference room together, our steps measured, our expressions professional. Only when we were in the elevator, doors closed, did Maya speak. That went exactly as expected. Phase 1, I agreed. Now we wait for the internal pressure to build. It didn't take 2 weeks. It took 3 days. The call came from Karen, the CFO, not from my father. The board would like to schedule another meeting, she said. There are some questions about specific aspects of your offer. Of course, I replied. We're available at your convenience. The second meeting was smaller. Just Karen and the company's legal counsel representing Renwick. No sign of my father. Or Ethan. Maya and I, along with our legal team, represented Nova. The questions were technical, detailed. Integration timelines. Client transition protocols. Employee retention strategies. Technology migration plans. We had answers for everything. We had prepared for everything. At the end of the meeting, Karen looked at me directly. Off the record, she said, the majority of the board finds your offer compelling. The premium is generous. The implementation plan is thorough. The strategic vision makes sense. I'm glad to hear that. However, she continued, Richard Renwick holds majority voting control. And he is resistant. I nodded. I had expected nothing less. Has he articulated specific objections to the offer itself? Beyond the emotional aspects? Karen hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Richard has concerns about the future of the company name, the legacy he's built. All addressed in our proposal. Yes, she agreed. He also has concerns about leadership continuity. Meaning Ethan's position. She nodded slightly. Among other considerations. I leaned forward. Karen, I appreciate your candor. Let me be equally direct. Nova's offer is fair, generous even, given Renwick's current market position and challenges. But we have other potential acquisition targets. Our interest is not unlimited, and neither are our resources. She understood the message. Time was running out. If my father's emotional resistance prevented the deal, other opportunities would take priority. I'll convey your position to the board, she said. The next week passed in silence. No word from Renwick. No meeting requests. No counteroffers. I maintained my focus on Nova's other initiatives, our ongoing projects, our core business. I didn't call my father. I didn't press. I waited. 10 days after our second meeting, Karen called again. The board has voted to recommend acceptance of your offer, with some minor amendments to the terms. Her voice was carefully professional, but I could hear the tension underneath. Richard has agreed to abide by the board's recommendation. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm pleased to hear that. We'll review the amended terms immediately. The amendments were minimal. Some adjustments to the integration timeline. Enhanced severance packages for certain executives. A more prominent role for the Renwick name in our combined branding. Nothing that changed the fundamental structure of the deal. We accepted all of them. 3 weeks later, the acquisition was announced publicly. Nova Technologies acquires Renwick Solutions in strategic expansion. The press release was respectful, emphasizing the strengths of both companies, the complementary nature of our services, the enhanced value for clients. No mention of family connections. No hint of personal history. The business media covered it as they would any acquisition of similar scale. Analysts generally approved of the strategic fit. Our stock price ticked up slightly. Renwick shareholders, including my father, received the premium we had offered. The business world saw nothing but a sensible corporate transaction. The day the deal closed, I received a text from my mother. The first direct communication in over a year. Will you be coming to the house when you're in town? There are things we should discuss. I considered not responding. The acquisition was complete. The business transition was underway. There was no practical need for family reconciliation. But something made me reply. I'll be at the Peninsula Hotel tomorrow. Lunch at 1? We'll be there, she answered. I arrived early, choosing a quiet table in the corner of the hotel restaurant. I wore a simple blue dress, pearl earrings, my armor of calm professionalism. When they entered, my mother leading, my father following with visible reluctance, I stood to greet them. Mom hugged me awkwardly. Dad offered a stiff handshake. We sat in uncomfortable silence until the waiter took our drink orders and departed. You look well, Mom said finally. Thank you. So do you. More silence. Dad stared at his water glass, turning it slowly between his fingers. I suppose congratulations are in order, he said eventually, not looking up. You've achieved what you wanted. If you mean a successful acquisition that benefits both companies, yes. He finally met my eyes. Is that all it was? Just business? The question hung between us, heavy with decades of dismissal and disappointment. Would you believe me if I said yes? I asked quietly. He didn't answer directly. You could have approached us differently. You could have come to me first, talked about your interest in the company. We could have explored a merger, a partnership. Something that preserved what I built. Would you have taken me seriously? I challenged. If I had come to you 3 years ago and said I wanted to be part of Renwick's future, would you have seen me as a potential leader? Or would you have patted me on the head and told me business isn't for dreamers like me? He flinched slightly. You never gave me the chance to see you differently. I gave you chances my entire life, Dad. Every idea I shared. Every achievement I earned. Every milestone I reached. You never saw me as someone who could succeed in business. You never believed in me. That's not fair, Mom interjected. We always supported your education, your independence. Support isn't the same as belief, I replied. You supported me as long as I stayed in my lane, as long as I didn't challenge your perception of who I was and what I was capable of. Dad's jaw tightened. And now? Now that you've proven your point? What happens to Renwick Solutions? To my legacy? The integration plan hasn't changed, I said. The Renwick name will continue as a division of Nova. The legacy will be honored and preserved. Under your control. Under my leadership, I corrected. Yes. He shook his head. Slightly. I still don't understand how you did it. How you built something large enough to swallow what took me a lifetime to create. There was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Not anger or resentment, but genuine bewilderment. Perhaps even a reluctant respect. I learned from watching you, I said, surprising myself with the admission. Your focus. Your determination. Your unwillingness to give up when things got difficult. I applied those same qualities to building Nova. He blinked, taken aback by the unexpected acknowledgement. The difference, I continued, is that I also learned to adapt, to see changes in the market as opportunities rather than threats. Renwick became vulnerable because it stopped evolving. Not because you lacked skill or vision, but because you became too committed to doing things the way they'd always been done. Mom reached across the table, touching my hand lightly. Will Ethan have a place in the new structure? The question I had been waiting for. The heart of their concern. Ethan will be offered a position commensurate with his skills and experience, I said carefully. Like everyone else at Renwick, he'll need to demonstrate that he adds value to the organization. He's your brother, Mom said, as if that explained everything. He's also an executive who helped lead a company into decline, I replied. I can't ignore that reality because we share DNA. Dad's expression hardened again. So this is your revenge. Push Ethan out, take what I built. I set down my water glass with deliberate care. This isn't revenge, Dad. This is consequences. For years, you told me I wouldn't succeed because I didn't understand business. You gave Ethan every advantage, every opportunity, because you believed he was naturally suited for it. You were wrong on both counts. I built something substantial, something lasting. Ethan helped weaken what you gave him. That's not fair. Mom protested. It's not about fair, I said. It's about reality. About facts and performance and results. The things Dad always claimed to value above all else. The waiter returned for our food orders, creating a brief respite from the tension. When he left, Dad surprised me by asking a question I never expected. Was I wrong about you, Alexis? The directness of it, the vulnerability beneath the words, caught me off guard. For a moment, I couldn't answer. Yes, I said finally. You were wrong about what I could achieve, what I could build. But you weren't entirely wrong about me. I am a dreamer. I do chase ideas that might seem impractical at first glance. The difference is, I've learned how to turn those dreams into reality, how to make the impractical practical. That's what innovation is. Something shifted in his expression. Not surrender, not complete acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of a reassessment. And Ethan? He asked. Was I wrong about him too? I chose my words carefully. Ethan has qualities that could make him valuable in the right role. But leadership wasn't it. Not yet, anyway. He needed time to develop, to earn his position. You didn't give him that. You handed him authority without ensuring he had developed the skills to use it effectively. Dad was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. Mom watched him anxiously, then turned to me. What happens now? To us, I mean. To this family? I hadn't really thought beyond the acquisition, beyond the business transaction. Family reconciliation hadn't been part of my strategic plan. I don't know, I admitted. That depends on whether we can see each other clearly now. Whether we can build something new based on who we actually are, not who you always thought I was or who I resented you for being. And who am I, in your eyes? Dad asked quietly. I met his gaze directly. A man who built something significant through hard work and determination. A man who loves his family but couldn't see past his own expectations to recognize their true potential. A man who might still have valuable wisdom to share, if he can accept that success doesn't always look the way he imagined it would. Lunch ended without resolution, without dramatic declarations of changed hearts or tearful reconciliations. Just a careful, tentative acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted. We parted with awkward handshakes and promises to stay in touch that none of us were entirely sure we meant. I flew back to Seattle that evening, focusing my attention on the integration process that would consume the next several months. There were difficult decisions ahead, staff redundancies to address, systems to merge, clients to reassure. I couldn't afford to be distracted by family dynamics, by the unresolved questions that lingered after our lunch. The weeks that followed were intense. I made weekly trips to Renwick's headquarters, meeting with department heads, reviewing operations, identifying strengths to preserve and weaknesses to address. I deliberately scheduled these visits for days when my father wasn't in the office. We weren't ready for that level of direct interaction, that daily reminder of how completely our roles had reversed. Ethan was a different matter. As head of client relations, he was central to the transition process. I couldn't avoid him, nor did I try to. Our first one-on-one meeting was scheduled for my third visit, a necessary but uncomfortable milestone in the integration journey. I arrived at his office, formerly our father's before Dad had moved to a larger corner suite, 10 minutes early. The space was meticulously organized, awards and client testimonials displayed prominently on the walls. A shrine to projected competence rather than actual achievement. Ethan entered exactly on time, his expression guarded, posture defensive. "Alexis," he said stiffly. "Or should I call you Miss Chen now?" "Alexis is fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Thank you for making time today." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "As if I had a choice." "We all have choices, Ethan. Always." He sat behind his desk, maintaining the physical barrier between us. "Let's get this over with. I assume you're here to fire me, to complete your takeover." I studied him for a moment. The brother who had always been the favorite, the chosen one. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without our father's constant validation propping him up. "Actually, I'm here to offer you a position," I said. "But not the one you currently hold." He blinked, surprise momentarily replacing resentment. "What position?" "Client Success Manager for our mid-market division. You'd work with existing Renwick clients to ensure a smooth transition to our integrated services. Your familiarity with their needs and history would be valuable." "A demotion," he said flatly. "A realistic assessment of your skills and experience." I corrected. "Your strengths have always been in relationship maintenance, not strategy or innovation. This role leverages what you do best while removing responsibilities that haven't played to your strengths." His face flushed. "Who are you to judge my strengths and weaknesses? You haven't been part of this company. You don't know what I've accomplished. I've reviewed your performance metrics for the past 5 years, Ethan. Client retention under your leadership dropped 18%. New client acquisition fell 22%. Average contract value decreased. These aren't judgments. They're measurable results." He had no immediate response to the data. Instead, he shifted tactics. "This is revenge, isn't it? For all those years when Dad favored me over you. When I got opportunities you didn't." I shook my head. "This isn't about the past, Ethan. It's about building the strongest possible organization moving forward. I'm offering you a role where you can succeed, where your abilities align with the responsibilities. That's more than Dad ever did for you." "What do you mean by that?" he asked, defensive. "He set you up to fail," I said simply. "He placed you in leadership positions you weren't prepared for, gave you authority without ensuring you had the skills to use it effectively. He did it out of love, out of a desire to secure your future, but the impact was harmful. To you and to the company." Ethan's expression shifted, anger giving way to something more complex. "You think I don't know that?" he said quietly. "You think I haven't felt the weight of his expectations every single day? The constant pressure to be the son he wanted, to run the company the way he would? This vulnerability, this glimpse beneath the entitled exterior, caught me by surprise. For the first time, I considered that perhaps Ethan had been trapped in his own way, confined by the very favoritism I had resented. "Then why not say something?" I asked. "Why not ask for the training you needed, the mentoring that would have prepared you properly?" He gave a small, defeated shrug. "And disappoint him? Confirm what he never said but always feared, that I wasn't cut out for this? That his son wasn't the natural successor he believed me to be?" I sat back, re-evaluating the brother I thought I knew. "So you struggled silently, pretending confidence you didn't feel, while I fought openly for recognition I never received. Ironic, isn't it?" he said with a faint, bitter smile. "You were free to fail because no one expected you to succeed. I couldn't fail because no one imagined I could." The insight landed like a revelation, shifting the narrative I had carried for decades. The golden child had been burdened by expectations just as surely as I had been limited by dismissal. Different cages, but cages nonetheless. "What if," I said carefully, "we both stopped living in reaction to Dad's vision? What if you took this position, not as a demotion but as a reset? A chance to build skills in an area where you naturally excel, without the pressure of living up to impossible expectations?" He studied me, suspicion still evident but tinged now with consideration. "And if I refuse? If I walk away entirely?" "That's your choice," I said. "We'll provide the severance package outlined in the acquisition agreement. It's generous. You could take time to figure out what you actually want, not what Dad wanted for you." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, the possibility of freedom from expectations clearly tempting. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Take a week," I offered. "The position will remain open until then." I stood to leave, then paused at the door. It was a start. The integration process continued. Some Renwick employees embraced the change, excited by Nova's innovative culture and growth potential. Others resisted, clinging to the way we've always done things. A few departed voluntarily. Others were let go as redundancies became clear. It was the necessary pain of transformation, the discomfort that precedes renewal. 3 days after my meeting with Ethan, my father requested a meeting. I agreed, scheduling it for my next visit the following week. I spent the intervening days preparing mentally, steeling myself for whatever confrontation or manipulation might be coming. When the day arrived, I approached his office with measured steps, professional demeanor firmly in place. His assistant, the same woman who had guarded his door for as long as I could remember, gave me a curious look as she announced my arrival. I wondered what stories she had heard, what version of events had filtered through the company grapevine. Dad stood as I entered, gesturing to the sitting area rather than maintaining the power dynamic of his desk. A small concession, but a notable one. "Thank you for coming," he said, his tone formal but not hostile. "Of course," I replied, taking the offered seat. "What did you want to discuss?" He settled across from me, hands clasped loosely in his lap. "I've been reviewing your integration plan in detail. It's more thoughtful than I initially gave it credit for." Not the opening I had expected. "Thank you. We put considerable effort into designing a transition that preserved Renwick's strengths while addressing its challenges." He nodded slowly. "You identified weaknesses I didn't want to see. Systemic issues I'd been avoiding confronting." The admission clearly cost him something. My father had never been one to acknowledge mistakes or blind spots. "It's difficult to see problems in something you've built from nothing," I offered. "There's too much emotional investment, too much personal identity wrapped up in its success." "Perhaps," he conceded. "Or perhaps I simply became complacent. Resistant to change." I waited, sensing there was more. "I spoke with Ethan," he continued after a moment. "About the position you offered him. And he's considering it. He asked for my advice." A faint smile touched his lips. For the first time in years, actually. Not just going through the motions of consultation while doing what he thought I wanted. "What did you tell him?" Dad leaned back slightly. "I told him to make his own decision. That I'd support whatever path he chose." I raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpected. Is it?" He studied me thoughtfully. "I've had time to reflect, Alexis. On my choices. On the company. On how I handled both of my children. And what conclusions have you reached?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. Despite the sudden tightness in my chest. He took a deep breath. "That I failed you both, in different ways. I pushed Ethan into a role he wasn't ready for, didn't help him develop the skills he needed. And I dismissed you entirely, never seeing the potential that was right in front of me." The acknowledgement I had wanted for so long, delivered in his office, surrounded by the trappings of the company I now controlled. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "Why?" I asked simply. The question that had lingered for decades, through every dismissal, every comparison, every missed opportunity for recognition. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. At first, it was simple gender bias, I suppose. Old-fashioned thinking about who should lead a company, who had the temperament for business. By the time you were showing clear aptitude, I'd already committed to the narrative. Ethan was the successor, you were the creative one. Too stubborn or proud to admit I might have misjudged. And later? When I was building my own career, my own company. He looked away briefly. By then, acknowledging your success would have meant confronting my failure, both my failure to see your potential and my failure to properly prepare Ethan. It was easier to dismiss your achievements, to tell myself you were just lucky or riding a temporary trend. The honesty was startling, almost disorienting. This wasn't the defensive, controlling father I had prepared to face. "What changed?" I asked. "Everything," he said simply. "The acquisition. Seeing the company I built pass to someone else's control. Realizing that someone was my daughter, the child I never believed could succeed in business." A rueful smile touched his lips. "It's quite the wake-up call, having your worldview so thoroughly disproven." I nodded, understanding the sentiment. Even as I struggled to reconcile this reflective man with the dismissive father of my memories. "I have a proposal," he said after a moment. "I'm listening. I'd like to stay on during the transition. Not as an executive, not in any formal leadership role. As an advisor. Someone who can provide context, institutional knowledge, help bridge the gap between Renwick's past and Nova's future. I studied him, looking for the ulterior motive, the hidden agenda. Why? Why not take the severance package and enjoy retirement? Because this company has been my life for 20 years, he said simply. Because walking away completely feels impossible. And because perhaps this is my chance to finally see you in action, to understand the leader I failed to recognize you could become. The request was unexpected, the vulnerability behind it even more so. My carefully prepared defenses felt suddenly excessive, misaligned with the conversation that was actually happening. It would be complicated, I said cautiously. The power dynamic has shifted completely. Could you really accept direction from me? Could you contribute without attempting to control? I don't know, he admitted, the honesty surprising both of us. I'd like to try. I considered the proposal, weighing the potential benefits against the emotional complexities. 3 months, I said finally. A defined consultancy role with clear boundaries and expectations. We'll evaluate at the end of that period whether it's working for everyone involved. Relief flickered across his face. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It's conditional, I added. On your ability to respect the new leadership structure. To offer guidance without undermining decisions you disagree with. To recognize that while your experience is valuable, the final authority now rests with me. He nodded slowly. Understood. We spent the next hour outlining the parameters of his advisory role, establishing boundaries, setting expectations. It was the most productive, most honest conversation we had ever had about business. Perhaps about anything. As our meeting concluded, he hesitated, then asked, "Would you have dinner with your mother and me tonight?" Nothing formal, just family. The invitation caught me off guard. I'm not sure that's a good idea yet. There's a lot of history to process. Of course, he said quickly. I understand. I gathered my notes, preparing to leave, then paused. But perhaps next time I'm in town. With some clearer boundaries about what we discuss and how we interact. He nodded, accepting the partial acceptance for what it was, not reconciliation, not yet, but an opening. A possibility. The following weeks brought unexpected developments. Ethan accepted the client success manager position, approaching it with a humility and openness I hadn't anticipated. Without our father's shadow looming over him, without the burden of living up to impossible expectations, he seemed almost relieved. In client meetings, his natural charm and relationship skills shone through, unhampered by the strategic decisions that had previously overwhelmed him. My father's advisory role evolved gradually. The first few weeks were awkward, his instinct to direct rather than suggest creating moments of tension. But he was trying, visibly working to adapt to the new reality. When he forgot himself, reverting to old patterns of authority, he would catch my expression and correct course, sometimes with a self-deprecating smile that would have been unimaginable months earlier. The integration process accelerated. Renwick clients, initially wary of the acquisition, began to see the benefits of Nova's innovative approach combined with Renwick's established relationships. The technology migration, potentially the most disruptive aspect, proceeded more smoothly than projected. Staff from both companies began to form cohesive teams, old rivalries giving way to collaborative problem-solving. 6 weeks into the transition, my father requested another private meeting. I approached it with less apprehension than our previous conversation, but still with careful preparation. His office, now technically a temporary space as we reorganized the physical layout of the headquarters, was less imposing than it had once been. Personal items had been packed away, awards removed from walls, the space transitional rather than territorial. I've been reviewing the Q3 projections, he began without preamble. The integrated services model is performing better than expected. Yes, I agreed. The cross-selling opportunities are materializing faster than we projected. It's your vision, he said, surprising me. The integration framework. The product alignment. I wouldn't have seen it this way. I accepted the acknowledgement with a nod. Different perspectives have value. That's why diversity in leadership matters. I see that now, he said quietly. Too late for Renwick as an independent entity, but perhaps not too late for personal understanding. Something in his tone, a hint of genuine regret, prompted me to respond more openly than I might have otherwise. It's never too late to reevaluate assumptions. Your mother and I have been talking. About you. About Ethan. About how our expectations shaped both of you, for better and worse. And what conclusions have you reached? I asked, curious despite my lingering wariness. That we did damage. We never intended. That in trying to provide security for Ethan and direction for you, we ended up limiting you both. He paused, gathering his thoughts. That perhaps the greatest gift we could have given was simply seeing you clearly and supporting who you actually were, not who we thought you should be. The insight, delivered without defensiveness or qualification, caught me off guard. This was the conversation I had wanted for decades, the recognition I had craved and eventually stopped hoping for. That would have changed everything, I said softly. Yes, he agreed. For all of us. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of missed opportunities and unnecessary struggles hanging between us. But here we are, I said finally. Despite it all, here we are, he echoed. You, running a company that includes the one I built. Ethan, finding his footing in a role that actually suits him. And me, learning lessons I should have grasped decades ago. Better late than never? I suggested, a hint of dry humor breaking through. He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Much better. Though I wouldn't recommend the route we took to get here. No, I agreed. There were certainly more direct paths available. Another silence, this one more comfortable than the last. I have something I'd like you to consider, he said. A personal request, not a business one. Go on. Your mother's birthday is next month. We're having a small dinner at the house. Nothing elaborate. Family and a few close friends. Would you come? Bring your husband if you'd like. I'd like to meet him. The invitation represented more than a simple birthday celebration. It was an acknowledgement of the new reality, an attempt to build a relationship based on who we had become rather than the roles we had previously occupied. I'll need to check our schedule, I said, neither accepting nor declining immediately. But I'll consider it. He nodded, accepting the conditional response. That's all I can ask. As I prepared to leave, he stopped me with a final question. At Thanksgiving, when I said you would never succeed in business, did you know then what you would eventually do? That you would one day acquire Renwick? I considered the question carefully. Not specifically, no. I knew I would prove you wrong. I knew I would build something significant. But the acquisition wasn't a long-term plan. It was an opportunity that presented itself when Renwick became vulnerable. And you seized it, he said, not as an accusation but as an observation. Yes, I acknowledged. I seized it. Both as a sound business decision and, if I'm being completely honest, as vindication. As proof. It was both, he agreed. A strategic business move and a personal statement. I nodded, appreciating his willingness to acknowledge the dual nature of what had happened. For what it's worth, he added, the statement has been received. Loud and clear. As I walked out of his office, past the reception area where I had once waited nervously with my carefully prepared business proposals, past the conference room where I had presented Nova's acquisition offer, I felt a shift within myself. The driving need to prove my father wrong, to force him to see my value, had been the engine of my ambition for so long. Now that he had acknowledged his error, now that the point had been definitively made, what would fuel me moving forward? The answer came with surprising clarity: the work itself. The challenge of building, of innovating, of leading. The satisfaction of creating something valuable, not to prove a point to someone else, but because the creation itself was worthwhile. 3 months after the acquisition, the initial integration phase was complete. The most critical systems had been merged, staff restructuring had been implemented, and clients had been transitioned to the new service model. It was time for a formal assessment of our progress, a clear-eyed evaluation of what was working and what still needed adjustment. I organized a joint leadership retreat at a secluded resort on the Washington coast. Key executives from both Nova and the former Renwick would spend 2 days reviewing data, sharing insights, and charting our course for the next phase. It was a strategic necessity, but also a symbolic milestone, the point where we would truly begin functioning as a unified entity rather than 2 companies awkwardly joined. My father's advisory role was scheduled to end the following week. He had surprised everyone, including himself, with his ability to adapt to a non-leadership position. His institutional knowledge had proven valuable during the transition, his insights helping us navigate the complex web of client relationships and internal dynamics that formal documentation couldn't capture. But the predetermined endpoint was approaching, and we hadn't discussed what might come next. I arrived at the resort early, taking a moment to walk along the windswept beach before the others arrived. The Pacific stretched endlessly before me. Waves rolling in with rhythmic persistence, each one unique yet part of a larger pattern. It struck me as an apt metaphor for what we were building, individual talents and perspectives flowing together into something more powerful than any could be alone. The team began arriving throughout the afternoon. Maya, my trusted COO, who had been instrumental in the acquisition process. Karen, the former Renwick CFO, who had transitioned seamlessly into a senior financial role at Nova. Various department heads and team leaders, some from each original company, now working as colleagues rather than competitors. Ethan arrived just before dinner, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in years. The client success role suited him. He was thriving in an environment where relationship building was valued over strategic decision-making. We had begun developing a tentative professional rapport, not quite the sibling relationship we had never truly had, but a respectful collaboration that occasionally hinted at something warmer. My father was the last to arrive, pulling up just as the welcome reception was beginning. I watched through the lobby windows as he parked his car and sat for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, seemingly gathering himself for what lay ahead. This would be the first time he had participated in a company event without being the central authority, the unquestioned leader. Even in his advisory role during the transition, he had maintained a certain separation, a buffer between his former status and his new reality. He entered the reception with careful dignity, accepting a glass of wine from a passing server, nodding greetings to former Renwick employees who still regarded him with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. I made my way toward him, aware of the eyes tracking our interaction, the subtle shifting of conversations as people observed without seeming to. "Dad," I said, keeping my tone professionally warm. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. "Important milestone." We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of our complicated history hanging between us despite the progress of recent months. "Have you had a chance to review the preliminary integration assessment?" I asked, defaulting to business as the safest territory. "Yes," he nodded. "The client retention numbers are impressive. Better than I expected, to be honest." "Ethan deserves much of the credit for that," I acknowledged. "His team has managed the transition exceptionally well." Something flickered across my father's face, pride, perhaps, but without the possessive quality it once would have carried. "He's found his place," he said quietly. "His genuine strength, not the role I tried to force him into." The admission, offered voluntarily in a semi-public setting, marked how far he had come from the unyielding patriarch who had once dismissed my every achievement. The evening proceeded with the careful choreography of corporate events. Dinner was served, casual conversations flowed, professional relationships were strengthened through the shared experience. I moved throughout the room, connecting briefly with each attendee, ensuring everyone felt included and valued. Leadership basics, but crucial for building the unified culture we needed moving forward. The formal sessions began the next morning. I opened with a presentation of the integration metrics, the cold, hard data that would tell us objectively how successful the merger had been thus far. The numbers were encouraging. Client retention exceeded projections. Revenue synergies were materializing ahead of schedule. Cost savings from eliminated redundancies were on target. Employee satisfaction, after the initial drop that inevitably accompanies organizational change, was trending upward again. These results reflect the efforts of everyone in this room, I concluded. The transition has been challenging, but the data confirms we're on the right path. The day unfolded with a series of working sessions. Teams presented their specific metrics, highlighted areas for improvement, proposed adjustments to our integration roadmap. We debated options, challenged assumptions, refined strategies. It was productive, occasionally intense, but consistently constructive. My father participated actively but appropriately. He offered insights when relevant, particularly regarding long-standing client relationships, but carefully avoided undermining current leadership. He asked thoughtful questions without dictating answers. He supported without controlling. It was a delicate balance, one he maintained with surprising discipline. As the day's formal sessions concluded, I noticed him standing alone on the terrace, overlooking the ocean, hands clasped behind his back, watching the sunset paint the waves in shades of gold and crimson. I joined him, maintaining a respectful distance, allowing him the option of privacy if he preferred. "Productive day," he commented, acknowledging my presence without turning. "Yes," I agreed. "The teams are working well together." He nodded. "Slightly. The cultural integration is further along than I expected. Less us versus them than these situations typically produce." "We've been deliberate about that," I said. "Creating mixed teams, emphasizing complementary strengths rather than focusing on differences." "Smart approach," he acknowledged. "One I might not have taken." I glanced at him, surprised by the admission. "I would have imposed Nova's culture completely," he continued, still gazing out at the horizon. "Demanded conformity to the acquiring company's ways. It would have been efficient in the short term but costly in the long run." "We're building something new," I explained. "Not Nova absorbing Renwick, but a stronger entity that incorporates the best of both." He turned to face me then. "Your vision has always been more inclusive than mine. I saw it as a weakness once. I was wrong." The acknowledgement, delivered simply and directly, without qualification or defensiveness, momentarily left me without response. "Your advisory period ends next week," I said finally, changing the subject to more practical matters. "Yes," he agreed. "As we agreed. Have you given any thought to what comes next?" He turned back to the ocean, the fading light casting his profile in shadow. "Some. Your mother has been pushing for more travel. There are places we've talked about visiting for years but never made time for." "That sounds nice." "It does," he agreed. "Though I'm not sure how long I'd be content with just tourism and leisure." I waited, sensing there was more. "I've had some preliminary conversations with Westridge University," he continued, "about teaching a course in their business school. Practical entrepreneurship. Building something from nothing." The direction surprised me. "Teaching? I wouldn't have predicted that." A faint smile touched his lips. "Neither would I. But the integration process has been instructive. Watching you lead, seeing different approaches, recognizing the limitations of my own perspective, it's made me reconsider what I might have to offer. Not as the unquestioned authority I once imagined myself to be, but as someone with experience worth sharing, alongside other voices and viewpoints." The humility in his assessment, the genuine self-reflection it represented, was perhaps the most tangible evidence of how profoundly our relationship had changed. The father who had dismissed my business acumen for decades was now finding value in learning from my leadership approach. "I think you'd be an excellent teacher," I said, meaning it. "Your practical experience would be invaluable to students. And you've always been good at articulating complex concepts clearly." "Thank you," he said simply. Then, after a brief hesitation, "though I suspect I still have as much to learn as to teach." We stood in companionable silence, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. The moment felt significant, not a dramatic reconciliation, not a complete healing of old wounds, but a quiet acknowledgement of growth, of possibilities, of paths forward neither of us could have imagined at that Thanksgiving dinner 3 years earlier. The retreat's final day began with team-building activities, structured exercises designed to strengthen relationships across former company lines. I participated alongside everyone else, navigating problem-solving challenges with a mixed group that included former Renwick managers and Nova team leaders. My father did the same, working with his assigned team without attempting to dominate or control, contributing his perspective while respecting others. The closing session was my responsibility, a presentation outlining our vision for the fully integrated company, the roadmap for the next 12 months, the strategic objectives that would guide our decisions. As I took the podium, I glanced around the room, noting the attentive faces, the absence of the skepticism that had been evident in many former Renwick employees during earlier integration meetings. 3 months ago, Nova Technologies acquired Renwick Solutions, I began. Today, those company names remain as divisions and brand identities, but the distinction between Nova people and Renwick people has begun to fade. We are becoming something new, something stronger, something that couldn't have existed without both founding organizations. I advanced through my presentation, outlining specific objectives, acknowledging challenges ahead, celebrating progress already achieved. Throughout, I emphasized the complementary strengths that were driving our success: Nova's technological innovation combined with Renwick's established client relationships, Nova's agile development methodology enhanced by Renwick's rigorous quality control processes. As I neared the conclusion, I hesitated briefly, then made a spontaneous decision to deviate from my prepared remarks. Before we close, I want to share something personal, I said, setting aside my notes. Many of you know that Renwick Solutions was founded by my father. What fewer of you may know is that for most of my life, I was told I didn't have what it takes to succeed in business. That I didn't understand how the real world worked. That my ideas were impractical, my approach unsuited to building something lasting. The room had gone very still. I could feel my father's eyes on me but didn't look in his direction. Those messages shaped me profoundly, not by convincing me they were true, but by fueling my determination to prove they weren't. I built Nova Technologies with that determination driving me forward, through every setback, every doubt, every moment when success seemed impossible. I paused, gathering my thoughts. The acquisition of Renwick wasn't planned as a personal vindication. It was a strategic business decision that made sense for both companies. But I won't pretend there wasn't a moment of profound satisfaction when the deal closed, when the company I had been told I could never build purchased the company I had been told I could never understand. A few smiles appeared around the room, acknowledging the human element beneath the corporate transaction. What I've learned since then, however, is far more valuable than vindication. I've learned that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about creating something worthwhile. Something that solves problems, that serves clients, that provides opportunities for talented people to grow and thrive. The satisfaction of building is infinitely greater than the satisfaction of proving a point. Now I did glance at my father. His expression was complex, a mixture of regret, pride, and something that might have been admiration. I've also learned that we are all more than the boxes others put us in. My brother Ethan, who was expected to follow a specific path, has found greater success charting his own. My father, who I once saw only as the unyielding authority figure who dismissed my potential, has demonstrated a capacity for growth and adaptation I wouldn't have believed possible 3 months ago. A few heads turned toward where my father sat, his posture straight but not rigid, his expression open rather than defensive. As we move forward as one company, I encourage all of you to look beyond the labels and limitations others might place on you. To recognize that your greatest contributions may come from aspects of yourself that haven't been fully valued in the past. To see change not as a threat to who you are, but as an opportunity to discover what you might become. I concluded with the practical details, next steps, follow-up meetings, implementation timelines, but the energy in the room had shifted. Something in my unplanned personal remarks had resonated, creating a connection that my carefully prepared strategic overview alone wouldn't have achieved. As the session ended and people began gathering their materials, preparing for departure, I found myself surrounded by team members from both original companies, asking questions, offering insights, engaging with the vision I had presented. The artificial boundaries that had separated Nova people from Renwick people seemed to have dissolved further, accelerated by the shared experience of the retreat and perhaps by my unexpected transparency. My father approached as the crowd thinned, waiting patiently until I had addressed the final questions. That was quite a closing statement, he said when we were finally alone. It wasn't planned, I admitted. It just felt necessary to acknowledge the personal history underlying the corporate narrative. He nodded slowly. It was powerful precisely because it was personal. Because it was true. We walked together toward the resort entrance, where cars were being brought around for departing executives. I owe you an apology, Alexis, he said as we reached the lobby. Not just for underestimating you all those years, but for making that underestimation so central to your journey. No parent should be an obstacle their child has to overcome. The directness of his acknowledgement, offered without prompting or expectation, caught me by surprise. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. I'm proud of you, he continued. Not because you proved me wrong. Not because you succeeded by conventional metrics. But because of how you've succeeded. The company you've built. The leader you've become. The way you've handled this integration, including the parts involving me. The words I had wanted to hear for so long, delivered now without qualification or condition. I felt a tightness in my throat, an unexpected surge of emotion I hadn't anticipated. Your mother and I would still like you to come to her birthday dinner next week, he added. No pressure, just family. Your husband too, of course. I considered the invitation, weighing the progress we had made against the history we carried. I think we'd like that, I said finally. It's time. My father's car arrived first. As the valet held the door, he turned to me one last time. You know, when you walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago, after I told you that you'd never succeed, I was angry. Offended that you would challenge my assessment so directly. I remember, I said dryly. What I couldn't admit then, not even to myself, was that I was also afraid. Afraid you might be right. Afraid the certainties I had built my life around might be wrong. Afraid the daughter I thought I understood completely was actually someone I didn't know at all. The honesty of the admission, the vulnerability it represented from a man who had once seemed incapable of either, was perhaps the clearest measure of how far we had come. And now? I asked. Now I'm grateful, he said simply. Grateful that you were strong enough to walk away. Grateful that you built something remarkable despite my lack of faith. Grateful that circumstances have given me the chance to see what I was too blind to recognize before. He extended his hand, a formal gesture that somehow carried more genuine emotion than an embrace would have. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this transition. To see what you've created. To learn from the daughter I should have been learning from all along. I took his hand, then made a spontaneous decision and pulled him into a brief hug. Instead, see you at Mom's birthday, I said as we separated, both a little embarrassed by the unexpected display of affection. He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, then got into his car and drove away. I watched until his car disappeared down the winding resort driveway, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. From the dismissed daughter to the CEO whose company acquired her father's. From the parent who couldn't see his child's potential to the man now willing to learn from her example. From a family defined by rigid roles and expectations to one cautiously exploring more authentic connections. The transformation wasn't complete. There would still be awkward moments, old patterns reasserting themselves, careful navigation of tender spots. But something fundamental had shifted, something neither of us could have imagined possible at that Thanksgiving dinner when he had so confidently declared I would never succeed. As I waited for my own car, I thought about success, what it meant, how it was measured, how its definition had evolved for me over time. Once, it had been about proving my father wrong, about forcing him to recognize my value, about winning a contest he didn't even know we were having. Now, it was about something larger, something more meaningful than personal vindication. Success was building something valuable. Creating opportunities for others. Solving problems that mattered. Leading with clarity and purpose. And perhaps, most surprisingly, it was about finding a way forward with my family that honored both the painful past and the potential future. My car arrived, and as I slid into the driver's seat, I felt a sense of quiet resolution. The acquisition that had begun as both a business decision and a personal statement had become something more, a catalyst for transformation that extended far beyond balance sheets and organizational charts. It had changed my father. It had changed my brother. And perhaps most significantly, it had changed me, not by making me stronger or more determined, but by freeing me from the need to prove myself, allowing me to lead from a place of confidence rather than defiance. As I drove away from the resort, back toward the life and company I had built, I thought about the story I would tell at my mother's birthday dinner, when family and friends would inevitably ask about the acquisition, about working with my father, about the dramatic reversal of fortunes that had unfolded. It wouldn't be a story of revenge or triumph. It would be a story of growth, of perspectives shifted, of possibilities neither side could have imagined when my father had smiled at that Thanksgiving dinner and told me I would never succeed. It would be a story not of winning or losing, but of finding a better way forward than either of us had known how to imagine. And that, I realized, was the most unexpected success of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.